The Verdict, a Sidebar production, hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crow and Dunleavy sponsors The Verdict. Also sponsored by Delta Dental, Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, and C.H. Guernsey and Company. Each week on The Verdict, we present an objective discussion of contemporary and legal issues, topical issues that will affect Oklahomans in their daily lives. The Verdict, a Sidebar production.
With Kent Myers, and Kent, an old-fashioned debate for our show.
It's fun. We haven't done it quite this way before, doing it live for our viewers and on a race that's very hotly contested and in which there's a great deal of interest. It's for the Oklahoma County Republican nomination for the District Attorney's Office. And why don't you tell us, Mick, about the District Attorney's duties?
Well, I will do that. First of all, we should mention there is a Democratic candidate, Larry Menard. There is. He is unopposed and will not be a part of this Republican debate tonight. The District Attorney is an elected state officer with a 4-year term whose primary duty is to file criminal charges against and prosecute persons accused of crimes committed in the district. Some of the other duties of the DA include providing opinions and advice to county officers, to represent the county in civil lawsuits, to represent any county employee in court involving the employee's official conduct or duties, and assist grand juries. And as any debate must have, a debate must have some rules.
Some rules, although I think we need to bring up this chart. Daily Oklahoman this morning. Jim Lang cartoon shows the fight and the tussle and the dust and the feet and the hands of the district attorney candidates, with some viewers, voters off to the side saying lawyers.
I think we've agreed those are actually the campaign managers yeah. and not the lawyers.
Well, they are, and of course we're going to take care of the contestants. We've seated them on opposite sides of each other. It is a very interesting race with a lot of issues, but let's talk about the rules. First of all, a little disclaimer. Kent Myers, myself, I have a great affection for both candidates, and will do all I can to make sure that both sides have adequate time and opportunity to present their views. I've had a prior association with Mickey Homsey in the past in the legal area. I've had an association with Wes Lane in his campaign, and we on The Verdict here will continue to be, as we always are, impartial. We've met with both campaigns and agreed upon the rules. We had a scientifically designed coin flip to decide who would go first or last, and Mickey Homsey won the coin flip, and we'll have the last word today. We have a timekeeper, Kevin Gordon, and Mick, you're our judge. You're our controller of the time with the candidates, and they have agreed to follow your dictates in that regard. Our show's going to be a little different than some debates. We're going to start with some opening remarks, which may be typical. We're going to have questions from you and me. We're then going to play some radio ads that both candidates have run in our community, and give each candidate a chance to comment on the other's ad and on their own ad. Should be interesting. Then we're going to allow each candidate to ask the other a question or two, and to just have a across-the-table question and answer session. And then finally, as is typical, we'll have closing statements from each candidate, with Mr. Homsey finishing, making the last closing statement. After that, we're going to ask you to vote. Vote on the debate winner. You can do that at ktok.com. Mike McCarville's been very helpful in telling you about our debate, and he'll have his website up and running so that you can vote there. After this is over, you can also vote on the Verdict's website, theverdict.tv. I think those are the rules.
Well, let's get started with opening statements from each candidate. Mr. Lane, why don't you go first? Each opening statement will last 2 minutes.
Right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I think you should know that 2 of the proudest moments in my life were when Bob Macy recommended me and Governor Frank Keating appointed me as District Attorney for Oklahoma County. And there's a simple reason for that. I have a passion for the work. I've devoted almost my entire adult working life to representing citizens who have been victimized by crime. And over those now 17 years as a prosecutor, I've been fortunate to be able to amass around a 95% jury trial conviction rate, and I'm very proud of that. And also very importantly, during my tenure as district attorney over the last year, you should know that you have one of the finest district attorney's offices in the nation. We have one of the highest jury trial conviction records in the nation, and that compares with cities like Chicago, Houston, San Diego, Los Angeles, Dallas. You should be very proud. Yeah, and you should be, because Bob Macy trained us. But it's not only that I've done since I've been DA. I've also implemented something called Project Justice, a DNA program that helps ensure that no innocent person goes to prison. And also over my career, I've also been responsible for implementing juvenile delinquency programs in a number of times. And why? Because I'm very concerned about young people and them not getting involved in criminality. So I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of my staff's record. You are served again by one of the finest prosecutors' offices in the nation. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening, and I hope that you, the voter, will choose who you would like to be running your district attorney's office on August 27th.
Right on time. Mr. Homsey, 2 minutes to you.
Thank you very much, Mick. I would also like to thank the verdict for having us on here tonight. My name is Mickey Homsey, and I'm running for district attorney also, and I wanted to let you know why. But first, a little bit about me. I was born and raised here in Oklahoma City and went through the public school system. And I went on to OSU and then to OCU and got a law degree. I married a little girl by the name of Sydney Ann Harris, and we've been married for 28 years, and God blessed us with 3 beautiful children. And in fact, we just got back today from the baptism of our first grandchild in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When I got out of the district attorney's office, or when I got out of law school, I went into the district attorney's office as an assistant prosecutor, prosecuting cases anywhere from DUIs to murder in the first degree. I left there and went into private practice after a period of 2 years, and was appointed as a judge in 2 communities here in Oklahoma County for a period of 6 years. I then was appointed to the Board of Adjustments in 1990 by then Mayor Ron Norick, and served as the chairman of the Board of Adjustments here in the city of Oklahoma City. The reason I'm running for district attorney is that there are serious problems in the DA's office. When I told my wife I was going to run for office, she asked me if I was crazy. I told her that you must be a little bit crazy to do public service, but I believe with the experience that I have as being a judge, an assistant prosecutor, and a private lawyer in the past 25 years, that I have the experience and the professionalism to bring a great asset to the DA's office, where I can bring a top-to-bottom review of the DA's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Homsey. Well, you're watching a special edition of The Verdict, a debate between the Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney, Mr. Wes Lane and Mr. Mickey Homsey. We'll be right back. And welcome back to this special edition of The Verdict. The 2 Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney are with us, and time for some questions and answers. Kent, we've allowed 3 minutes for each candidate's question.
Yes. I want to start with asking Mr. Lane a question. You have decided that you will retry or try Terry Nichols on state murder charges and seek the death penalty. Why did you reach this decision, and how do you justify spending the amount of money that will be spent, that will be required to bring this trial about, including any appeal?
Well, first of all, Kent, let me make clear on one issue, and that is that there is a gag order on the case, which restricts me in just how far afield I can go. I think what I can do is I can talk about the process of the decision, and I can talk about the taxpayer dollars. I think this particular question that you ask is probably a really good question, in that it helps really define how Mr. Homsey and I go about making decisions. What you see in this particular case is that in the process that I went about, before I came out and made a statement as to what I was going to do, I went about a process, and it was a process that I hope reflects great integrity and how I decision make on a continuing basis. I talked to not only federal prosecutors, state prosecutors, talked to law enforcement, talked to victims. I had a number of legal issues, and I was very concerned about as to how we were going to do certain things and how would that fit within the federal system and the state system. I got all my questions answered, and I also talked to, very importantly, the victims in this case, or the victims' families, or the surviving victims, before I made a decision, before I made an announcement on what I would do. Once I had done all of that, and if the voters remember, it took me a while to do that. I took my time on this because it's a critical issue. No district attorney, I dare say, has probably had to make as momentous a decision as a decision of whether to prosecute Terry Nichols or not. Now, in response to the money part, one of the things that's very important to understand is that the defense of this case, the defense of Mr. Nichols, it comes out of the court fund. It is not new taxpayer dollars. It is not, there's not going to be a special tax. And the court fund is made up of people that, or rather, fees that are generated by people who use the courthouse. Most specifically, it's fees and fines generated actually that my lawyers have gotten from criminal defendants. And so Oklahoma County raises millions of dollars every year from that purpose. Now,
about 15 seconds left.
I would contrast the decision that I made in the process with what Mr. Homsey did. Mr. Homsey, I dare say, probably all he did was look at the Daily Oklahoman poll, see that there was a significant group against me, and that was the way he made the call.
Question now for Mr. Homsey on the same subject. It's been reported that if you are elected that you have made the decision not to retry Terry Nichols. What explanation would you give to the victims and the victims' families for coming to this decision?
Well, Kent, let me tell you, this took a lot of thought process and a lot of visiting. I too visited with federal prosecutors. I too have visited with some of the victims, not all the victims, in this community. And I did not look at the poll by the Daily Oklahoman. I even went to Bob Macy when he was about to file the charges. Bob and I go back, when he first went into office, he gave me part of his practice to shut down. So I understood, and we had a great relationship, and I asked him not to charge them or file those charges back then. What my problem with the Terry Nichols case is that Terry Nichols has been convicted in the federal system to serve the rest of his life without the possibility of parole. Now, not only would we be paying for the prosecution of this case in Oklahoma County, but we would also be paying for the defense. So instead of going up one way, we're going up both ways at the same time. We'll go to the Court of Criminal Appeals, we'll come back, we'll go to the Court of Criminal Appeals again. We have had this case on file for over 3 years, spent $1.7 million, and we're not for sure, even if we were to get a death sentence, if the Supreme Court of the United States would uphold the conviction. They have already stated that Oklahoma is not a fair and just place to draw a jury pool from, or they would have tried Nichols and McVeigh in either Tulsa or Muskogee. They pulled both cases and tried them in Denver. So what makes us think now that all of a sudden, some 7 years later, we are a fair and impartial place to draw a jury pool from? Also, what if we've spent all this money to try him to get a death sentence that they convert to a life sentence? We could spend $15 or $20 million. But right now, we could use those same dollars prosecuting people who are committing crimes today on our streets. As you've read the Oklahoman, and I've read the Oklahoman, crime is up, according to the FBI, of last year over the year before. Let's put these dollars to use. Let's use tax dollars effectively and wisely in the prosecution of these criminals. Let's put them away.
20 seconds left.
Let's put them away now and get them off the streets. Mr. Nichols is going to be in jail for the rest of his life in the federal system. He will never get out, period. That's why I feel the way I do about trying Nichols again in Oklahoma County.
Mr. Lane, it's been alleged that your office has lost 40% of the cases that it's tried against the public defender. Is that accurate? Is that acceptable?
Well, it's complete baloney. I mean, it's really downright amusing because it really speaks to kind of the way that this has been a campaign that has been characterized by, well, let's scare the voters to death. Let's make them think that not only are we letting people out wholesale out of jail, but let's let them think that we are incompetent and can't try a lawsuit. In fact, but as I said in my opening statement, you know, we actually have won 82% of our jury trials. That's over 8 out of 10 cases that go to jury. And remember, the cases that go to trial are the cases that the defense lawyers think they can win. And so they take us to trial and make us prove it. We have one of the finest records, and it's provable. We've got the stats, we've got the cases. We can establish that. What Mr. Homsey is doing, in fact, Mr. Homsey has been really kind of amusing. He's told us that he would be kind enough to teach my young lawyers how to try cases. I'm sorry, but I don't think Mr. Homsey has ever won a jury trial against my office. So I'm not quite sure how he's going to teach us to do anything. So I am very proud of my office. This is a group of lawyers that Bob Macy handpicked, hand-trained, and we're doing great, great, great work in the courtroom.
It's time for a break. This is a special edition of The Verdict, a debate between the Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney Mickey Homsey and Wes Lane. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, a special edition of The Verdict. Typically, you'll see us here on Sunday mornings at 9 o'clock discussing legal and political issues pertinent to Oklahoma. But this time, we're hosting a live debate between the two Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney. I have a question now for Mr. Homsey. Mr. Homsey, it's been written that you've recently switched to the Republican Party. Was that done for this race, and what were the reasons that you chose to do that?
No, Mick, it wasn't done for this race. My wife and I both changed between 2 and 3 years ago to the Republican Party. I have been voting Republican since 1972. I initially joined as a Democrat back when I was 18 years old because I asked my dad what I was supposed to join, and he said, join as a Democrat so you can vote. I did, and I'm proud that I changed. I have joined a pretty nice crowd of people, and I'm real proud that Wes wasn't on the welcoming committee for Ronald Reagan and Wes Watkins and J.C. Watts and the list, Ernest Istook, and the list goes on and on, or they all would still be Democrats. I did not join the Republican Party to run for this race. I've wanted to be DA for many, many, many years, but that didn't have anything to do with the fact that I changed. I changed because that's the way I've been voting for many years.
Mr. Lane, let me ask you something on a kind of a current issue. Just a month ago, the United States Supreme Court ruled that it is cruel and unusual punishment to execute the mentally retarded. Our legislature this session passed a law putting limits on the execution of the mentally retarded. Governor Keating vetoed that bill. So now in Oklahoma, we are left with only the Supreme Court ruling. If you are faced with dealing with mentally retarded criminal defendants, they may be subject to the death penalty. How will you handle it, and what do you think the correct rule is about executing the mentally retarded?
Well, first of all, let me just touch on Mr. Homsey joined the Republican Party 5 days after Bob Macy announced that he was not going to be running again. But in answer to your question, the way that this works is there's been a long-standing effort to undermine the death penalty. It's become chic these days now to claim that inmates or that convicted defendants are now mentally retarded. I personally have put 2 people on death row, one of whom who in the courtroom to try to save herself from the death penalty was claiming the reason why we shouldn't give her the death penalty was because she was had a college career, everything going on. Later, on appeal, she's claiming she's mentally retarded. Now, I already have a record that when I believe that individuals, such as the case of a defendant named Jack Chance, when I believe an individual is so low functioning that they do not have the moral culpability for the acts that they did, then I am not going to pursue the death penalty. However, just because they have a low IQ does not mean that they are not fully functioning, that they don't have families, jobs, pay taxes, and all that. So I think we need to be very wary about this mental retardation business and what's the real mission here.
Mr. Homsey, there's been a lot of publicity in recent months about irregularities in the Oklahoma City Police Lab. It has been alleged that District Attorney's Office in the past may have pushed expert witnesses to testify beyond the science. What's your view of that whole situation?
Well, Mick, you know, I can only go by what has been filed in the past year or more. I believe you're talking about Joyce Gilchrist. What concerns me about Joyce Gilchrist is her lawsuit against the District Attorney's Office. She filed a lawsuit about 2 or 3 months ago and alleged in her allegations that even after she was terminated, that Wes was still using her as an expert witness. I can assure you that as the District Attorney of Oklahoma County, I would not use an individual, expert or otherwise, that had a tainted past. It's obvious that her credibility has been questioned not only by the state courts, but by Judge Thompson in the federal court, and has ordered that she never reappear in his court again. I cannot fathom that the District Attorney's Office would even consider using her, much less after she was terminated. So I think it's a very serious problem and a very serious concern, and hopefully Mr. Lane's Project Justice, when I get there, will fund that and have monies for DNA to get these innocent people, if they are there, out of jail, period.
Let's take a break. You are watching a special edition of The Verdict, a debate between the 2 Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney, Mr. Wes Lane and Mr. Mickey Homsey. We'll be right back with a discussion about the political ads used in this campaign. Welcome back to this special edition of The Verdict. The 2 Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney are with us. And Kent, if you own a radio and live in the Oklahoma City area, you've probably heard at least one of the ads for this campaign. Yes,
I don't remember a campaign where radio ads were so effective, or at least so widely talked about, either loved or hated, but in any event caused a lot of discussion. What we're going to do is something that we think is original with us on The Verdict. We're going to play the radio ads and then give each candidate a chance to say something about each one. Without wasting any more time on the discussion of the rules, let's go ahead and start with Mr. Lane's radio advertisement, and we'll just hear the audio, of course.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Terry. You probably don't know me, but most of you remember my son David, the youth minister gunned down at a War Acres car wash. Powerful politicians have been talking about a candidate for district attorney. I'm not a politician. I'm just a mom. But I need to tell you something about Mickey Homsey that the politicians won't. Mickey Homsey is a criminal defense lawyer. Mickey Homsey defended the man who murdered my son. In court, he attacked the boy who tried to save David's life at the crime scene. Mickey Homsey even fought the police officers who investigated my son's murder and the men and women in the DA's office who spoke for my David when he could no longer speak for himself. I'm urging you to speak for David on August the 27th. Let's keep Wes Lane and the fine men and women in his office who dedicate their lives to defending the rights of victims, not criminals.
Paid for by Wes Lane for Oklahoma County District Attorney.
Mr. Homsey, your response.
Well, Kent, it seems like to me, and I think the Constitution speaks to this, you are innocent until you're proven guilty. I took an oath to do a job as a professional, as a lawyer, to represent those rights of people charged with whether they're crimes or automobile accidents or divorces, to be involved in cases. I do not apologize to anyone in this community for representing people zealously in the defense of any charges they've been charged with. As that ad does not speak, that individual was convicted of the murder in the first degree and received life without the possibility of parole. The thing that doesn't come about is that they spent about $200,000 searching for a weapon that they never found. The judge in the case was recused because, according to the Court of Criminal Appeals, she had broken the law herself by having conversations with the district attorney's office without my presence. So she was recused out of the case. I believe I did everything I could to represent that young man, and my daughter married a youth minister. I had a tough time getting involved in that case, but I did it because my oath dictates that I do, and I will use that same tenacity and that same zeal as the district attorney, representing the people of this county the same way I represent defendants in this county or people charged with crimes.
Mr. Lane, your reply.
Well, you know, Kent, for 17 years, I've tried a lot of very difficult cases against some very fine criminal defense lawyers who have zealously represented their clients as they should. And I will be the first in line to support a defendant's right to a fair trial. But the Oklahoma Constitution, by a vote of the people, says specifically that victims of crime are entitled to be free from harassment, intimidation, and those sort of things in the courtroom. Carolyn Terry was not speaking to Mr. Homsey being zealously representative of his client. She was speaking to the base manner in which, and the demeaning manner in which he treated her and other people throughout the course of that case. And that's just not right. And so long as me and my office are in this job, we're going to stand up for the rights of victims and against those who would in any way demean or intimidate them.
Time's up.
Let's switch now to Mr. Homsey's radio ad. We'll listen to that and then have some responses.
Hello, I'm Ron Norick. When I was mayor of Oklahoma City, I worked with District Attorney Bob Macy, who knew the importance of effectively prosecuting criminals. This year, with no elected incumbent in the office, the people of Oklahoma County have the opportunity to choose another tough but fair district attorney. He's Mickey Homsey. I know Mickey Homsey to be honest, competent, and determined to protect our families from criminals. As a former prosecutor, judge, and attorney, Mickey has the right combination of experience to be a great DA. When you vote on August 27th, I urge you to vote for Mickey Homsey for District Attorney. Oklahoma County needs Mickey's integrity and experience.
This is Mickey Homsey. I'm grateful for Mayor Norick's support and yours. There's a crisis in the District Attorney's office. Violent criminals are going free because simple paperwork isn't being done on time. With your help, I'll restore confidence in the District Attorney's office. I respectfully ask for your vote on August 27th.
Paid for by Mickey Homsey for Oklahoma County District Attorney, MickeyHomseyForDA.com.
Mr. Lane, your response.
Well, I'm sure that Mayor Norick, by dropping Mr. Macy's name in that, was not suggesting somehow that Mr. Macy had endorsed Mr. Homsey or anything like that. And in fact, I certainly respect Mr. Norick for coming to the aid and support of his longtime friend, Mr. Homsey. But I think what really is the issue in that is, again, it's this: the sky is falling, chicken little approach in which Mr. Homsey is attempting to scare the voters into voting for him. And that's just not right. I mean, he talks about his background and as being a prosecutor. I know he was an assistant DA for a couple of years. And let me tell you something. We've got some very fine young 1- and 2-year lawyers who we refer to affectionately as being baby lawyers who are very wet behind the ears and they need a lot of support. And he also looks a lot to his background and experience as a judge in, I guess, Hera and Choctaw. As I understand it, though, those are primarily the responsibility of handling traffic tickets. So I'm not really sure what real experience he's bringing to the office other than representing whether it's criminal defendants or plaintiffs, personal injury lawyers, and that sort of thing. But I would say this, there is no crisis in the district attorney's office. I've already spoken to the fact that if we have a crisis and are winning 82% of our jury trials, golly, we need some more crisis.
Mr. Homsey, your reply for just about a minute.
Yes, sir. Right here are the cases that I have talked about that have been released without being charged. And the prosecutor in me says that this is incompetence. That right there are the ones that have been charged on the very day that they were released. And the judge in me says that, you got to do it before the day they're released. And these are people that were not charged at all that stayed in jail for 10 days. Now, the private lawyer in me says, you can't get the cases released in 10 days and you don't have charges. That's pretty sad. These cases are releases. This young man, Mr. Ingram, whoever he is, robbery with a dangerous weapon, he was released on the 21st of March and the charges were filed the 29th of March.
About 10 seconds.
And this charge was shooting with intent to kill. He was released the 27th of March and the charges were filed on the 8th day of April. I didn't blow up all these different charges.
We're out of time, Mr. Homsey.
But
you're watching a special edition of The Verdict, a debate between the two Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney, Mr. Wes Lane and Mr. Mickey Homsey. We'll be right back on The Verdict. Yeah. Welcome back to this special edition of The Verdict. The two Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney are with us. Kent, why don't you explain the rules for this next segment?
We're going to let the candidates talk to each other in front of all of you. We're going to ask each candidate to ask the other candidate a question. Any question they choose. We've not tried to set any rules about what it should or should not be. And the question should not exceed 30 seconds in length. The answer can be from 3 to 3.5 minutes in length, as the candidates may choose. We'll start with Mr. Lane asking Mr. Homsey a question.
All right. Mr. Homsey, I'd really like to learn a little bit more about your experience in the District Attorney's Office because you rely upon that quite a bit and as you present yourself as qualified for this job. I'd like to know, for instance, how many violent criminals that you prosecuted as first chair, in other words, the lead lawyer, not just helping out. And I'd also like you to talk specifically about that lead lawyer experience and death penalty cases that you've tried, or murder, rape, robbery, that sort of thing.
I'd be happy to. When I was there almost 25 years ago, Wes, we didn't have first and second chair situations. You would get a file and you might get it that morning and they'd say, go and try this case. Now that could be a robbery case, that could be assault with a deadly weapon, that could be assault with a dangerous weapon. I did try one murder case and a second murder case. I remember the one specifically because it was the last case I tried when I left the DA's office in about 1979. It was not a death penalty case, it was a life case, and it was one shot, and it happened in a bar. I got prepared on that case beginning on Friday, talking with all the witnesses on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and started trying it on Monday. We were through on Thursday, and we got a life sentence on that case. I also tried other violent crimes and would even take on tough cases such as The only judge that has ever been prosecuted in Oklahoma County Court was Gar Graham. I prosecuted him for drunk driving when he was sitting on the bench. You may or may not remember him, because that goes back to about 1978 or 79. And we put him in jail for a 10-day period of time. Now, that was a sitting judge who ended up getting in trouble for drunk driving and having problems with the Bethany Police Department. And we put him in jail for 10 days, and I think it was like a $200 fine. It may not seem serious now, but it was then, as a lot of cases are. And I believe that I've told you on numerous occasions that I think my benefit of being in private practice and the DA's office and being a judge is I know where a criminal defense lawyer is going to come from before he even leaves his office. So I think that's a great benefit to have versus just being in the DA's office all of these years. I believe that with my experience in the private practice and in the DA's office, that there's a lot of techniques that those young lawyers can learn over there. And I want to thank you for telling me that I'm still wet behind the ears. I feel a lot younger after tonight's debate, but that's basically where I come from as far as my experience in the DA's office. I don't know how difficult it can be on these murder cases. I think that we need to have a lot of competence in the office, a lot of professionalism, a lot of integrity, and strong ethics. I believe that it's very important to protect this community as the lead law enforcement officer of this community, and I believe that I bring those assets to the table, period.
Mr. Homsey, it's now your turn to ask Mr. Lane a question.
Okay. Wes, sometime back in your neighborhood, people were supporting me to run for this office. And you sent all of them notes, handwritten notes, and I have brought the note with me. And I would like you to explain why in the world you would jeopardize
I remember the note.
a lawsuit in your office that you have recused from, and we have to assign some other out-of-county DA to handle this case now, and this is costing the taxpayers additional monies. And in addition to this, why in the world would the DA's office in April of this year bring back a death row inmate for a 1992 misdemeanor?
Question's long enough.
Thank you.
All right. You know, when I came back, I know you've got a good friend on my block who is your supporter and who has been helping you all along in this. When I came back, my wife and I had actually been out of the neighborhood for a few months while we were doing a long-awaited remodel. So we moved back in, and prior to that, the summer before, an individual had been charged in that neighborhood. Police had served a search warrant, gone in, found drugs in the house, parties going on, that sort of stuff, and it really concerned the neighbors quite a bit, as it should. Shortly after that, this same individual, not a real rocket scientist apparently, is stopped, days later, after he's already charged, been bonded out, gotten out of jail again, as you know, is their right. He gets rearrested, gets back in the neighborhood. Well, some of the neighbors, instead of talking to me and telling me what their concerns were about that, I come back literally the first week back into my neighborhood, and there is the Mickey Homsey sign in the yard of this one fella, and you know who I'm talking about. And then within days, they're sprouting like mushrooms all around this house. So I know I've got a little bit of a problem with the neighbors. And the neighbors are upset with me, but nobody has come and talked to me about this. And honestly, it kind of hurt my feelings. I thought, golly, if y'all are upset, I just live down this street. And so I write them a note. You bet I did. And I encouraged them. In fact, and I shared with them that let's just have a neighborhood meeting. We have them in other places around the city where drug houses and one thing or another is going on. I'll invite prosecutors to my own neighborhood just like I would to any other, or just like any other neighborhood association can invite them to their neighborhood. So that's what I did. Now, in the meantime, once they heard what the circumstances were, everybody but your friend, all of a sudden they understood why it was that I couldn't go beyond what this guy deserved, what I would do for anybody else. I mean, that would be heavy-handed. Just because he lives in my neighborhood doesn't mean that I can do something against this defendant that I would for any other neighborhood. But in the meantime, he gets a lawyer, and his lawyer points out to me, he says, Wes, this has the appearance under the ethical rules that because you have had a meeting in your home about a defendant down the street from you, this has the appearance of impropriety, which, as all of us at the table know, that's a violation of the ethical code. And so, realizing he was correct, I went ahead and decided that rather than to give that appearance, I withdrew. And that was the right thing to do. I talked about it to other lawyers in my office. They agreed, and so I did that. Now, about this April death row deal, you know,
about 20 seconds.
You know, one of the things I'll always do, and the people need to know I'll always do, if I'm wrong about something, if my office does something wrong, I'll give it up. I'll accept responsibility, not try to hide anything. We shouldn't have brought that person back. I agree with you. That was a mistake. When a person's on death row and prosecuting them on a misdemeanor, when we caught that, and we only file between 15 and 20,000 cases a year. It happens
At a time. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching a special edition of The Verdict, a debate between the two Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney, Mr. Wes Lane and Mr. Mickey Homsey. We'll be right back. And welcome back to this special edition of The Verdict. The two Republican candidates for Oklahoma County District Attorney are with us, and it's time for closing statements. Kent, what are the rules here?
Well, the rules are there are no rules except for time. This is the time when the candidates will talk directly to the voters, look them in the proverbial eye, and tell them what's on their minds and in their hearts about why they ought to be elected. And I hope that this will be very useful to our viewers. It's akin to closing arguments sometimes when the participants can say what they're thinking about and be persuasive. So we will start. The first candidate's closing statement will be by Mr. Wesley Lane.
Well, I thank you very much for having me tonight. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here very much. And it's been my privilege, in fact, to carry on the legacy of Bob Macy. And just like he did, if you choose me to continue in that role, I pledge to continue giving you one of the finest prosecutor's offices in this nation. And I pledge to continue to fight crime at every level. I mean, Mr. Macy taught me very well that crime doesn't occur just in a vacuum, and that every place that it rears its ugly head, you have to stamp it out. And if you want to know why, there's a very simple explanation for that. All you've got to look to is Bricktown here in Oklahoma City. Back in the 1980s, Bricktown and the area just to the north called the Deep Deuce were once a very, very dangerous place to visit. Prostitution, street drug usage were rampant. It was not the kind of place that you'd show up with your family. Mr. Macy back then pledged that he was going to lead the charge, and that place, in fact, was cleaned up. Criminals were put in prison or run out of town, and thanks to that leadership from the Oklahoma County District Attorney, you and your children are now able to go into that area, Bricktown, have dinner, and have a boat ride on the canal. And that's why we fight crime at every level. Now, Mr. Homsey is on the record for opposing my office's involvement in fighting such things as prostitution and drug use and illegal obscene materials possession. Now, he does not understand that in order to truly fight crime, the district attorney's office must lead. The city attorney's office does not have the power that the District Attorney's Office has. And regardless of Mr. Homsey's opposition, I will continue to fight that fight and to lead that fight because I understand why it must be done and I understand what must be done. Now, you can choose a group of experienced prosecutors hired and trained by Bob Macy, or you can choose Mr. Homsey in August and see what happens. The bottom line is this. God forbid that a crime would happen to you or your family. We wouldn't want that to happen at all. But if it did, you would be relying upon the passion, the commitment, the integrity, the experience of that prosecutor at that table to represent you, your interests, and the interests of the state of Oklahoma in the prosecution of that individual. The question that you've got to ask yourself is, who do you feel most comfortable with sitting at that table? Me and my staff, the staff that Bob Macy trained, or Mr. Homsey and whatever staff that he might bring in? Our career paths, Mr. Homsey and mine, have taken on very, very different paths over the years. My career focus has been law enforcement. I'm probably not the right guy that you would want leading something like the Public Defender's Office or the Oklahoma Criminal Defense Lawyers Association or the Oklahoma Indigent Defense System. My philosophy, my outlook, and where I have invested my life really probably make me not the best guy for the job. Well, by the same token, the question you've got to ask is, looking at what Mr. Homsey's background is, where his passions, where he has invested himself, his philosophical point of view, you've got to ask yourself, is he the best choice for district attorney? The choice, of course, will be yours in August. My hope is that you'll vote for what's there right now, one of the finest prosecutor's offices in the nation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Mr. Homsey, you have the last word.
Well, Kent, Mick, thank you very much for having us here today and being able to visit with the voters of Oklahoma County. You know, after 26 years of being in the practice of law and starting out in the district attorney's office and being a judge and being in private practice, I believe you do have a real choice. There's a difference between knowing all three sides of the criminal justice system or just knowing one. Now, Wes has been in the DA's office for many years, but it's time for a new look, a new view, a fresh idea. When I have said that the district attorney's office should not worry with prostitution, the reason I said that is because the 4 cases that have been taken care of in prostitution in the Oklahoma County Courthouse had nothing but 1-year deferreds and $50 fines. In the city of Oklahoma City, in prostitution cases, they have stronger ordinances than the state of Oklahoma has on their state statutes. The problem of it is that the city of Oklahoma City charges them with prostitution and hits them with a $1,200 fine, and on the second event, they hit them with a $1,200 fine and 30 days in jail. I have said, let the city municipalities take care of prostitution because the district attorney's office has some important issues to deal with. They have issues to deal with about released prisoners. This is not a scare tactic. What I'm doing is telling you the truth. We've got the paperwork from the Oklahoma County Courthouse where rapists, where people who have been charged with shooting with intent to kill, child molesters have been released into our community and have had charges filed with them a day or two or a week or a month later. There is no call for that. There's no reason to let these people back into our community without charging them first. I am not for bringing back death row inmates and wasting taxpayers' dollars ineffectively and uselessly. I am for using tax dollars wisely, effectively, and efficiently to put people in jail that we're afraid of, not those that we're mad at, and put them off the streets for a long, long time. Don't let them be repeat offenders. get them the first time, and don't worry about it. Now, I want you to understand something. My opponent in this case, Wes Lane, is a nice guy. But just being a nice guy is not enough for the district attorney's office. You've got to be a tough leader. And he's talked about me being a defense lawyer. I do not apologize for representing the common folk and the ordinary people in this community. I can remember when I was growing up, we didn't even lock our doors. Today, we have to. I'd like to see it come back where we don't have to lock our doors anymore, and we don't have to worry about criminals. You do have a real choice come August the 27th. I don't need this job, but I want this job because of this community, the one I've grown up in and the one I've loved all my life. I hope you will vote for me come August the 27th, because the real choice is yours. Thank you.
Thank both of you.
Thanks, Mr. Lane, Mr. Homsey, for coming. We are very pleased to be able to present this to our viewers. I think it's been very informative. We want to also thank the station, KSBI, for allowing us to have an hour's worth of prime time to let these Republican candidates make their views known. Thanks again to our sponsors, who also have made this show possible. And we are pleased that you have had the chance to hear this information. Now it's your turn. This show's called The Verdict. Let's let your verdict be heard on either ktok.com or www.theverdict.tv. Let us know what you think about what you've heard. Let us know who you think won this debate. And we wish both these candidates well in the upcoming weeks.
Primary election day is August 27th. The winner will go on to face Democratic challenger Larry Menard, who is unopposed on the Democratic side. As Kent said, thanks for joining us at this special time. And don't forget, you can see The Verdict every Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, right here on KSBI. For Kent Myers and our Republican candidates, I'm Mick Cornett. Thanks for joining us on The Verdict. Very good.
Good job.
Thanks,